results around all the ways in which you don't have, need more, want more money. Whatever your response is, we all have one. Because, as they say, money makes the world go round. Whether it's your $5 coffee every morning to start your day or the $3,000 loan payment you just made, not a day goes by for most of us that we don't consume, spend, study, or merely think about money. You could be the driver of a sports car wearing a diamond necklace or the homeless person who watches that car drive by. On one level or another, money matters to us all. Yet for as much as money matters, it's surprising that there's so much we don't know about it, and a lot of things that we think we do that are just plain wrong. This is a crash course on how your world and the world of high finances intertwine, in hopes that, in the end, we know that much more about this illusion that keeps the economic world spinning. Contrary to what you might think, money as we know it today, at least in its physical form, has remained largely unchanged for millennia. The first sign of what we might think of as a banknote took the form of a piece of leather in China in 118 BCE, and 900 years later, paper currency came to fruition. It would be another several hundred years before this kind of currency would make its way to Europe and then the rest of the world. Centuries have now passed, yet the basic concepts invented by the Chinese aren't that distinguishable from what we have today. In fact, the only real difference is what these notes and coins represent. The first real global system of valuing currency was the gold standard, which began in England in the early 1800s. It tied a currency's value directly to the established value of gold. So in a country like the United States, $1 was pegged at exactly 1/50th an ounce of gold. This system was set up that, in such a way, ideally it would provide a stable monetary environment around the world. And it did for a while, but as with all natural resources, the supply of gold was not as fixed as we originally thought. As a result, countries began dropping it as a means to measure the value of the money. In 1971, US President Richard Nixon officially severed the convertibility between dollars and gold.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
By that time, the US dollar was seen as the global standard currency, so once the dollar was no longer dictated by the value of gold, pretty much nothing else was. If the value of the dollar is no longer determined by the value of gold, what exactly makes $1 worth $1? Well, instead of a commodity-backed system like the gold standard, we now have something called fiat currency, which has no intrinsic value and is instead backed by a government. What gives today's dollar its value is the economic supply and demand in the United States. And who controls that? Governmental financial systems. In the case of the United States, it has the Treasury and the US Mint in charge of printing its money. But as we can see in the growing number of digital businesses and iPads in place of cash registers, money printing is a dying business. So if a government isn't literally printing money, how exactly does cash come into circulation? The vast majority of money exists only as numbers on a computer, incredible amounts of money digitally credited to commercial banks by a country's central bank. This central bank controls how much money it deposits into the commercial banks based on the economic situation of the country. During the earlier stages of the pandemic in the US, some of that money was sent directly to bank accounts in the form of stimulus checks. But that's an extreme case, and most of the time that's not how the money ends up with us. Here's how it usually works. A central bank sends money to banks and credit unions nationwide, and they in turn distribute that money into the economy by lending it to their customers. Which brings us to the topic of debt. Around 80% of Americans are in some kind of debt, yet many people don't know what exactly debt is and how its moving parts work. What they do know, and what is backed by several studies, is that even the idea of paying